So, when thinking about the concept of history, is history just knowing a bunch of events about the past? Historians actually think a little more critically about the past, and you'll frequently hear about the five C's of history, and that will give an idea of what historical thinking is all about. My name's Chris, and if you're new to the channel, I've been teaching history at the high school and post secondary level, aka college and university, for the last 20 years or so. And I want to talk about the five C's of history so that you'll understand what historical thinking entails. First of all, is change over time. Things today are not like they were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. People change over time, societies change over time. They evolve from one thing into another. And it's important to understand how these changes take place and what they mean for people in the present day. So, number one, change over time. The flip side of that is not actually number two, but it's important to remember that there are also important continuities. For example, in the United States, the way society looks today is a whole lot different than the way society looked nearly 250 years ago when the country was founded. However, you do operate under the same constitution with a few changes. So there is this continuity. There's still a Congress, there's still a president, although the president has changed several times over the 250 years. There's still a Supreme Court. If we look at other countries, there are continuities in terms of a monarchy or some sort of parliament. So there are continuities, but still, while those continuities take place and they exist, there is this change over time. For example, it used to be just white men who owned property could vote. Today, pretty much everybody who is a citizen and above 18 years of age has the right to vote if they choose to, number one, register, and number two, exercise it. So there's continuity, but there's also change over time. That brings us to number two, which is context, or sometimes called contextualization. We have to understand that people live in a given context, a given time, and sometimes that constrains the way they act and the way they think. I previously did a short on this concept, and I looked at Neville Chamberlain, who is widely accused of quote unquote appeasing Hitler. Well, he goes to Munich in September of 1938 and comes to an agreement that the Nazis could take over the Sudetenland, which was part of Czechoslovakia. And the Nazis had promised, Hitler had promised, he only wanted that and the good German people in the Sudetenland. He wouldn't take anything else, but he lied. And we look back at history and we think, how could Neville Chamberlain have been so insanely stupid to believe in what the Nazis were selling him? Well, we have to understand the context. Just 20 years earlier, there had been a greater war than anybody in the world had ever seen before. That was known as the Great War. Today, it's known as World War I. And literally millions of Europeans had died in this war. Nearly a million British subjects had died during this war. And what Neville Chamberlain is wanting to do in his context is to avoid a war that looked a lot like that. In hindsight, we can say, hey, it's 2020. We know what happens. We know that, the Nazis start this big war, and that's even deadlier than the prior war. But Neville Chamberlain doesn't have that benefit of hindsight. We can only understand his actions based upon the context in which he lived. Number three is causality. Historians like to ask questions of how and why things happen. And for something to cause another thing, it can't be like the butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the earth and then a volcano goes off on the other side of the earth. And we say that the volcano went off because the butterfly flapped its wings. Something logically has to proceed from one thing to another. A good example of this is the fact that the bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan caused the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to issue his famous Day of Infamy speech and lead the United States into the Second World War. It's important to remember Causation and correlation are not the same thing. Correlation would be the butterfly flapping its wings and then the volcano going off on the other side of the world. It's correlated, happens at the same time, but one did not cause the other. You can have the cause and effect when you look at Pearl Harbor and FDR asking for a declaration of war from the Congress. That brings us to number 4, which is contingency. As one of my graduate school professors told me, things are not inevitable until they actually happen. And there are many factors that go into a historical event happening as it does. If you remove one of the causative factors in what happens, the event may not happen as it happened, and it may not happen at all. For example, if you don't have the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany, does World War II happen at all? If you don't have the issue of slavery that goes back way before the foundation of the United States, does the Civil War happen in the 1860s? Probably not. So things are contingent upon a number of factors. So that brings us to the final C of historical inquiry or historical thinking, and that is complexity. History is not easy to understand in most instances. It's usually not just one factor that contributes to the world in which we live today. It's not black and white. There are a number of factors. Some of them should be weighted more heavily than others in understanding why things happen as they do. Historical events are complex because people are involved in historical events, and people happen to be complex critters. So that's something to take into account as well when you're thinking about this idea of historical complexity. So, to sort of sum up what we've talked about previously in this video, there are 5 C's of historical thinking. Number 1 is change over time. Things today are not like they used to be. It's corollary, which I've dubbed 1A is continuity. There are some things that are very similar or the same as they used to be. Number 2 is the historical context, understanding people in the time in which they live, understanding events in the context of when they occur. And then number 3, you have causality or causation. Something has to follow logically that has happened because of something else. It can't be a correlation. Something happens on one side of the world that doesn't really affect what happens on the other side of the world. We can't tie them together. Number 4 is contingency. You remove something from the equation and things don't happen as they actually did. And then number 5 is complexity. So we have to understand that all of these moving parts make history very complex to understand. It's not usually just one causative factor, it's multiple causative factors for a given historical event or a decision that a person makes. So, hopefully, that has explained something about historical thinking. If you have enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ding the bell so that you'll know when other videos like it are online. So, thanks for watching.